I never know if people can see what I'm seeing, or I don't know. It's disconcerting not having people confirm for me that they are seeing what I'm seeing. So the audio.
And your Twitch is up now.
Okay, the Twitch is up. Okay, good. That's all I need to know. Sweet. I think this is from the other section, or maybe not. No, this is from this section. We did the crystal ball in this section, correct? Yes or no? You guys can speak up. I think this was the crystal ball in this section. Nobody's saying it either.
Yeah.
All right, good.
Yeah.
You guys can speak up. I think this was the crystal ball in this section. Gotta love the echo. Okay, so we're gonna move on to materials. Okay, move on to materials. So first of all, for homework, everybody should have a material, one object per material, one material per object. Go to Window, go to Rendering Editor, go to Hypershade. Your Hypershade is your material editor in Maya. So, nowadays the Hypershade is pretty advanced, and we have what's known as a node-based view. So if we open up the Hypershade, we're going to have this view at the top, which I'm still accustomed to this view. This is going to show you what your material looks like. So if you have a Paint Effects material, so when I made my roses, for example, I have my rose material. And I'm just going to tell you right now, I hate to break it to you, but these Paint Effects materials are pretty much useless. So unfortunately, every Paint Effects object in your scene, you're 99% probably going to want to change their materials. So even though you have a rose material, it's not a particularly good one. So what should we use for materials? Well, the answer is go down here to the lower left under your Create. Hopefully you have this Create window under Arnold, Shader, and for almost every single thing in this scene, we're going to use the Arnold Standard Surface. This is called the AI Standard Surface, and when you click it, you've created a new one. It's up there. We can call it something, whatever it is we're going to make. So if we're going to make something out of ceramic, we should name it ceramic. In the big window here, we can see a node-based view, and we can get into the node-based stuff, just not today, not at this very moment. This is a more advanced feature. I typically, for the beginning at least, will try to stick to the top here and not do too much with node-based stuff. But yes, every attribute, we can plug one thing into another, right? So we'll talk a lot more about the node-based stuff. But for right now, I just want to concentrate on the materials or surfaces or shaders. They're sometimes called shaders up here. So if I say the word shader or material, it's the same thing. You might also notice from the node-based view that on top of the main node, we have something called a shader engine. That's what this is. And we typically don't touch this unless we have a volumetric material or we have to play with displacement, which we might not even get to in this class. So we typically leave this alone. Our shading engine node gets left alone, and most of the work gets done here with this node. Anyway, back to ceramic. Let's pretend there's something in my scene that's ceramic. Maybe this fruit bowl is ceramic, sure. So I can start with a ceramic preset, and this is where the important part is that I really want you to pay attention to. We can go to our ceramic preset, click replace, and now I basically have a default ceramic material, which I can change the color to be whatever I want. I don't know, ceramic maybe kind of this color, perhaps, kind of brown. So this is my ceramic material. How do I add it to the scene? There's two ways to do it. If you have middle click, by the way, you can just middle click and drag it directly onto your object. I'm using a trackpad, so don't have middle click. Another way to do it is to select the object, then right click on the shader or material you want to add, and with right click, use assign material to selection. And then you can see now I have a ceramic bowl. Very easy. All right. Easy peasy. So ceramic bowl. But now I want to talk about the properties of the ceramic bowl. If we click on the ceramic material or shader, we can look at these properties or attributes a little bit more. Under base, this is where our color comes in, and this is where normally we would feed a texture in. Please do not, I repeat, do not feed in textures yet for homework. That's basically what's going to be due a week from today. So I suppose for Thursday, you could use a solid color if you really wanted to, but for next Tuesday, so a week for today, we should have a photo plugged into our color. But for homework, just stick with the solid color. Next, I want to talk about the actual surface quality or surface. Is it bumpy? Is it shiny? Is it reflective? Is it transparent? The surface qualities, right? Down here, of course, we have color. Diffuse roughness, if we hover over this, it actually should tell us, well, it tells us the kind of roughness. But imagine this as being what your sandpaper, if something like sandpaper, it has that kind of really, really intense roughness on the surface, that's what this is going to give you. So as we turn up this, it's almost like microscopic roughness, then you're going to definitely see a change in the shader preview or shader ball here, but it's such a subtle change. You might note the diffuse roughness has only very, very subtle change to the surface because it's like almost microscopic. It's really, really subtle. What you should notice here is a lot of reflectivity or a lot of shininess. This is our specularity, and you can think of specularity as shorthand for shininess. So if you pull down the weight or the intensity of your specularity, that's basically making it less shiny. So you can see as I pull it down, I'm getting something a lot less shiny. So if I pull it way down, then you can see, right, that my ceramic is nowhere near as shiny. So it's a question of how shiny do you want your ceramic to be. That's what your specular weight will do for you. Now, back to roughness again. We also have roughness for our specularity or shininess, and this is really apparent. So if we turn this up, you should, you should start seeing what starts off as a perfect reflection here. As we pull up on the roughness for our specularity, it's roughing out the shininess. And if we use both diffuse roughness in combination with specular roughness, see, now we're starting to see our reflection and our specularity almost blur out. This is a pretty good start for me, I think, for this ceramic material. If I wanted to make it semi-transparent, because some of you guys are like, hey, how do I change the opacity? And that's a really good question. Because the thing about the AI standard surface, this is a physically accurate surface. So meaning that when light bounces off this thing, it's absolutely physically accurate. It's going to look just like ceramic or glass or gold or whatever it is. But if we want our ceramic to be somewhat transparent, this is where transmission comes in. And this is weird because in previous versions of Maya or previous renderers, this might be called opacity or translucency or something that makes sense. But transmission doesn't make a lot of sense personally to me. It's kind of counterintuitive. So I have no idea why they didn't just call this translucency, because it definitely is much more of a translucent slider. Watch what happens as I crank on the, oh my God, look what happens. See, so I changed the weight. And now you can see I'm getting a semi-transparent thing. Ceramic is not typically semi-transparent. So somebody was asking about how do I make something translucent or semi-transparent. Here it is. It's your transmission weight. If you're at a 1, which is basically 100%, you have glass. I've just turned my ceramic into glass. So if that's what you want, bam, now you know how to do it. But probably your ceramic is not going to be semi-transparent, so you probably want to keep this weight at 0. But let's see what it looks like. Let's test this, right? So we'll go to our render camera, and then we'll open up our render view. And to save on time, we could maybe use a render region. And also note that I'm rendering it like 640 by 480. So watch, what I can do is kind of draw a square around roughly where this thing is and use render region. So I'm not always having to render the whole scene. Okay. Before we go nuts with this, guys, there's a lot of things to talk about. So, are you rendering from the right camera? No. See, I'm not. I'm rendering from perspective. We never render from perspective. We always render from our render camera. So that's a obvious one. Make sure you're rendering from your render camera. Very important. Let's try this again, where we use a little render region. Next thing I want to talk about is sampling. Can you guys hear me? Is there anybody out there? I don't know. Say something.
Oh, yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
Can hear you.
Cool. Okay. From this render region, if I zoom in, I can see that I must have my lights turned off because look what's happened here. My glowing crystal ball is working really well. Everything else appears to be just pure black. So a few things right off the bat I need to fix, right? So my lights are all turned off. So first thing, let's turn off the glowing crystal ball temporarily. And the mesh light, just get rid of it for now. And then we'll turn on our candles, and we know by turning the visibility on, which is 1, we'll turn on our photometric lights, which are the IES lights, and of course our sky dome for our fill light. So now we should get something a little bit nicer instead of our crystal ball, which I just turned off. By the way, and for your notes, you might want to write this down. Mesh lights and volumetric lights can oftentimes take a lot longer to render. So it's okay to make a mesh light for a light bulb or a glowing crystal ball or something that's glowing, or even a glowing button on your, I don't know, on your electronics equipment. That's fine and it's encouraged, but just keep in mind that your mesh lights typically take longer to render than any other type of light. There we go. Whew, that took a little longer than I expected, but now we have a ceramic bowl. Right. Okay, so how can we make this render time a little bit better? It shouldn't even take me 23 seconds to render that. That's too long. So what do we do to fix this? How do we make our render times a little bit more manageable? Well, we can change our resolution, which currently is at 640 by 480. I don't really want to go too much lower than that. But everybody, really, really important. What's a brute strength way to make your render go faster? The simple answer is to turn down your sampling. Go to your render settings. This is here. First slate with an eyeball, that just opens up your render window. Second slate, that actually starts your render. Third is your interactive rendering, which we can talk more about, but this is very resource intensive. It's the same thing as your interactive Arnold renderer. It would be the equivalent of this guy, the Arnold Interactive. IPR stands for Interactive Placement Renderer. So this would be kind of the same thing as this, but it's very resource intensive. The last slate is your settings. Go here to change your resolution. Like I'm using 640 by 480 to keep my rendering time low. And in the Arnold tab, note that I have my sampling here. So if I turn my sampling all the way down to the default, which is 2 by 2 by 2, yeah, you might get your fireflies back. Yeah, you might get your noise back. But you know what? I'm just trying to test the ceramic material. So I don't really care about my noise or my lighting or my fireflies or my sampling if I just want to see what the material looks like. That's all I care about. Right? So then turn your sampling back down. You could even turn your sampling down to 1. I just went from 23 seconds, guys, down to 4 seconds. I hope that's impressive because, again, I don't want you guys waiting forever on these renders. There's even another way to make it even faster if that's not fast enough for you. So turn down your resolution, turn down your sampling. Then go into your render dropdown, and there's a checkbox here. This is very dangerous. I repeat, danger. But if you check this box on, then note it says render only the objects you have selected. You want to talk about saving on render time. Select the bowl and render it. And then what's going to happen, of course, it's just going to render only that bowl and nothing else. And how long did that take to render? Oh, I don't know. Not even 1 second. Right? So we can test our materials by, like, let's put some glass on the plates. Let's pretend the plates are made of glass, right? So then we'll follow the same process. We'll go to our window rendering editor Hypershade. We'll go to Arnold shader, AI standard surface. Then with the AI standard surface, always name these, guys. Oh my God, please name these, because you're going to get confused when you have 100 different AI standard surfaces and none of them are named. Because you might note that I'm not getting any kind of thumbnail here. So that's even more reason to name everything. Please name your materials. So if I just want this glass, of course I have a glass preset. That's no problem. Go to the glass preset, click replace, and then I have instant glass. And so do I want the glass, like these glasses glass? Or do I want the plates glass? I don't know. I think I'll stick with the wine glasses for now. And then right click, hold down right click, assign material to selection. Let's do something else for the plates. And don't worry, the reason that they disappear is because they're literally transparent. So what should we do for the plates? Let's see. What do we have? Let's make these plates from scratch. We'll again use AI standard surface because this is the physically accurate material. And if you want to call it plates, that's fine. Or ceramic plates, that's fine. Just name everything. Like, I don't know what this guy is, delete it, because it's not named. You got to name everything, really. So let's do this a little differently. So instead of starting with a preset, although I always recommend starting from a preset, I mean, we could make this frosted glass, but this is actually one that I would kind of stay away from. Let's try thin plastic. Okay, whoa. So again, this is very transparent. If we adjust the transmission, then we have something that's semi-transparent. What about color? Base color is set to 0. Let's turn the color up. So now we have a semi-translucent object, but it's still white. Let's make the plastic plates red or something. I don't know. So now we have red plastic plates that allow light to go through about, what, 0.42, so that's 40. If I type in 0.5, that's 50%. So basically 50% translucency. And let's make this a dark red color. Now here's kind of something that's sort of cool, is you can both change the specular color, which is the color of the reflection, and you can even change the color of the transmission, which is a little strange, but imagine as light passes through the object, you can make it like lighter red, or play with this a little bit. And we're starting to see, again, plastic plates that are semi-transparent. So let's see what it looks like. I'm genuinely curious. I don't know. Let's find out. So we'll select the plates. We'll right-click, and we'll say Add Material to Selection. And since we have this with a material on it, I can shift-click this. That has a material on it. Now I re-render. And because I only have those things selected, then that's all that should render and nothing else. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Who has questions? Ceramic? Plastic? Yes? Questions? There are a lot of you guys in here. I'm sure somebody has questions. hear me? Is there anybody out there? Oh, God. Okay, say something if you have questions. If not, I guess I got to keep going. So we already talked about gold, maybe.
I don't have any questions.
Okay, please interrupt me if you do. Please, because I have no idea if I'm going too fast or too slow or what. And I have a tendency to go fast, so then I lose students, and they don't want to speak up, and it's quite frustrating from a teacher standpoint.
There's a lot of lag, so you have to wait a second.
So then I lose students. Yeah, about a minute lag, it sounds like. Okay, let's make the candlesticks and the candles. So then I'll go to what? I'll go to shader. Again, Arnold, shader, AI standard surface. Just ignore this node view for now. Just pay attention to what's up here in the material preview window, I guess. I'm sure there's a name for this window, but yeah, just pay attention up here for now. We'll get to the node view a little bit later. This will be my candlestick. What preset do I want to start with? I mean, we have a lot of options here. Let's start with copper. But this is something I really want to show you guys. I think this is super, super cool. We can actually blend our materials. So if I want a blend of copper and something else, I can say preset, okay, I've got copper, but let's blend it with gold or maybe chrome. Let's blend it with chrome, right? And then we can blend 25% copper. See? So it's a really cool thing that you can do to blend your materials. Under preset, find the material you want to blend, and you can make some really weird blends. Like we could do 10% gold, 75% gold, you know, or 25% copper, or whatever, you know, any of these will blend together. It might produce some weird results because obviously blending car paint with skin might give you some weird results, but metallic car paint might work well, you know, for our candlesticks, maybe. All right. Once we're happy with it, oh, I almost forgot, changing the colors. So sometimes when you have an advanced metallic material like this, you can change the color obviously here with like the base color, that's fine. So that's one way to change the color, of course, just simply by changing the base color. If you want something a little warmer, for example, that works pretty well. But there might be, of course, color in your specular, and with metal sometimes you might want to pick something that's not white or off-white, or something like you can use your color picker, pick the original gold, and then pull back so it's a little bit whiter. That's usually how I make specularity for metal. But you could also check, because you might find that in some of these other attributes that you have color elsewhere, but it looks like it's just specular color and base color. Anyway, now that I have what I like, I select my candlesticks, I right-click, assign material to selection. Oops, I missed. I meant to do that. So right-click, assign material to selection. And then we get to keep going, right? So for the candles, we have wax. That's definitely a preset, without a doubt. So back to the same workflow. AI standard surface. Only this time our preset's going to be wax. We very clearly have a wax candle. So we use wax. If you want to change the color of your candle, oh, here we go. Look. Now with this candle, I have not only base color, but we also have color in transmission and in scatter, which is a little bit hard to understand. But of course, base color is going to be your main color. Transmission is how the light both passes through and scatters inside of the material. So if I wanted to make the color blue, we'll go with blue. You know, we're getting really nice blues and pinks, meaning the more light that goes through this, so the more light from your candle, the more you're going to see this pink color. So again, you might want to just, what I like to do anyway, is start with color picking the original color, blue, like that, and then maybe using this slider to go towards light blue, which makes more sense, meaning that when the candle flame hits that wax, it's going to go to the light blue, or it's going to go from the dark blue to the light blue. The scatter in this case being pink might be a little weird, but let's just see what happens. I always like to find out with these things. So again, select the candles. Now I have a new, I forgot to name my material. Always name your material. This is going to be candle wax. Candle underscore wax, whichever. Select the wax. Now right click, assign material. And now we can again render this and we can start seeing what this looks like. Now if the point lights are on, which they are, let's do something different here and turn the sky dome off, because I feel like a lot of my light is coming from my sky dome, so I'll hide that. And remember, if nothing is selected, I cannot emphasize this enough, what do you think is going to happen right now when I click render? I click the render button with nothing selected. What do I get? I get nothing. I get black. Because you got to watch this checkbox. If this checkbox is on, because I always forget, and you probably will too, if that checkbox is on, you're going to get pure black. So then you just want to shift select the objects that you know you want to render. So these are the objects I want to render, right? You might even shift select the lights that you want to render as well. Not the table. But here, just shift select everything you want to render. And remember that checkbox, render only selected objects. Wow, you can really see what the point lights are doing here. So this is telling me that, man, point lights are super warm. That's supposed to be blue wax, and and obviously the point light's intensity might be a little too high, because instead of getting blue or purple wax, it's bright orange. So you can see that the wax is maybe either the point lights are doing too much work, potentially, or the wax is too translucent. It's going to be one or the other. So you could pull back on your point light intensity, or you could make the wax less translucent. Let's say you want to make the wax less translucent. I go to the wax material, and I go down here to transmission. And then again with transmission, pull back. We want this less. See, if it's at 1, that's like 100% transparent. But if we pull back way back here, like to 0.3 or something, you can think of it as like 30%, if that helps you. 30% translucent. So now hopefully we'll get a little bit more blue. Let's turn the sky dome back on, but we'll pull maybe the intensity of the sky dome down, because sometimes in Maya 1 means 100. So let's go down here to 0.3, so like 30% intensity on the sky dome. And select the objects we want to test again, because that's kind of what this is about right now, is just sort of testing what these materials look like. You don't always have to select every object, obviously. Let's see what we get. And of course, if you want, you can always use render region, and that'll even cut down on rendering time even more. So only render your selected objects, only render with render region, and start adding materials. Hey, we're getting something better now. Look at this. It's starting to look nice. So I'm getting my purple back in my candle. The fill light from the HDR is giving me some reflections. I still think the fill light might be a little high, but at least we're able to see reflections in the metal and reflections in the glass. Who's got questions for me? Because this is what you get to do for homework, by the way. So who has questions? Anybody have questions? Check your photometric lights.
I think I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good.
Yeah, I don't really got
All right.
Yeah.
Just making sure. So for homework, you need an AI standard surface on everything. You can change the color, but I'm more interested in the surface qualities, such as Shininess. How specular is it? How transparent is it? That's what I'm more interested in than anything else. My photometric lights seem to be doing almost nothing for some reason. I'm not sure why. So I'll really crank them up to 2000. That seems absurdly strong, but let's turn up my IES lights or my photometric lights or my recessed lights, whatever you want to call them. You could even group these together if you wanted to and call it recessed lighting. Oh my God. Turn the ringer off on this. People won't stop calling me. All right, now, where are we? Oh yeah, Skydome should probably be a little bit lower in terms of intensity. Hit Control A for attributes. Go to your intensity, turn it lower, like 0.15. It's like 15%. Recessed lighting is much brighter. And as always, if you're only rendering selected objects, then of course you have to go back and reselect them. Otherwise, oops, I don't know where the glass went. There it is. Otherwise, it doesn't matter. But uncheck this render selected objects if that's the case. I typically like to use render region, and I like to use render selected objects just so my render time doesn't go through the roof. Now that you guys are starting to play with accurate lighting, with HDR sky domes, and with photometric lights and all that stuff, then your render time is starting to go up. This is only 15 seconds, and I'm definitely getting fireflies or noise issues, but I'm not going to worry about that until I get all of my materials on everything. Definitely that recessed lighting is much, much brighter, so I might have gone a little bit too bright with that. So let's say like 5 or 6, I'll go with 600. Here's a really weird old tip, and you don't have to follow this, but it's just something that I've gotten in the habit of doing over the years. It's a strange tip, honestly, and you absolutely don't have to follow it. And the tip is, if you use powers of 2, so like if I use 640, for example, in my intensity, that's a power of 2, then believe it or not, that'll increase your render times, or excuse me, decrease your render times slightly. So I repeat, if you're trying to do everything to optimize your rendering, it's not a bad idea to use power of 2. So I mean, if not 640, maybe 64 or 32 or 16 or any power of 2, believe it or not, will give you a slightly faster render. Not like hugely fast, and I've even had people like argue with me about this because that might have been true in the 80s and 90s. We're in 2020, so that kind of a trick is maybe not as useful as it used to be. But since computers kind of work on this idea of RAM, if you've ever bought a stick of RAM before, it's going to be like 64 megs or 128 megs, or now we have 16 gigs of RAM. But note that your RAM is always, again, in powers of 2. So it's kind of a weird trick. But when you're thinking about numbers in Maya and you use powers of 2, believe it or not, you should get slightly faster render times. Maybe not a lot faster, but now I'm starting to get something closer to what I want. We only have 20 minutes left, so who's got questions? How do I make wood if there's no wood? Preset. How about that? Is that a good question? I want a wooden table, but I don't have any wood. Like preset. So anything you don't have a preset for, it's fine. You still need to use the AI standard surface. And then what you basically do at this point, because again, there's no wood preset, at least not in Maya. We've got rubber, plastic, orange juice, milk, so many other things, but velvet, it's nice, but no wood at all. So then, if that's the case, you kind of have to make it from scratch. You could try to find something that's close, to start with. Like you might say, well, you know, maybe ceramic is close enough. But I mean, it really depends on the wood we're talking about. Is the wood shiny? Is the first question. So if the wood isn't shiny at all, then maybe you can take your specularity and just turn the specularity way down to 0 or close to 0. So that's the first question. Is the wood shiny? Well, if it's not shiny, then the weight becomes 0. If it's very shiny, then the weight maybe should be 1 for 100%. I mean, it's not going to be transparent, so leave that transmission alone. Leave the transmission at 0 because we have no transparency. We could change the color of the wood, I guess, if we wanted to just go with a solid color for right now. We could do that. And now we can kind of see what the specularity is doing a little bit more. So it's up to you as to how shiny you want your wood to be. Now, at this point, we don't have a huge amount of time. I think we only have like 15 minutes. So what do? We basically find anywhere that we can download a texture or a photo of wood. You could even simply Google wood texture. I don't want you to add textures until the last, or when this is due, basically. So this is going to be due in a week from today. So for Thursday, just worry about your material qualities, what's shiny, what's not shiny, that kind of thing. Don't worry about this texturing until Tuesday. So you get a whole week basically to finish your render. So again, for Thursday, worry about putting the AI standard surface on everything. For the next class, meaning Tuesday, 1 week from today, then worry about your texturing at that point. I'm giving you a little bit of a sneak preview is what's going on now. So your textures should be 1024, 2048, or if it's a very, very small object, then maybe you might opt for 512. But generally you want something at least 1024 by 1024. This is massive. This is like 4,000. So this is maybe a little bit huge, but let's see what happens. I can open the image in a new tab. There it is. I think this is pretty good for my table. I'll save it. And for the time being, I'll just put this in the folder. Remember, guys, you need to have a folder for your project. This is your project folder. Keep everything in one folder. Please, always, no matter what. And try to always name everything too. So I know I'm skipping ahead a little bit here, but if I'm happy with this, like for example, I can put the wood material on here and test the wood material in the renderer. Like in other words, select the wood object. Once I select the wood object, go back to my Hypershade, right click, apply. Come on, Maya. Right click, assign material to selection. Got to make sure it's selected though, obviously. So that's a little annoying. But if you have middle click, you can middle click and drag. Again, I'm using a trackpad. So now the wood is assigned to this. If you want to just render that without any kind of texture on it, you could either use render region, or you could use render selected objects, or you could even use a combination of render selected object with render region. And that's the best way to save on time, meaning that I don't want to waste any time. So then use render selected object only, use render region, and that's just a much faster way to render. We're not wasting time at all. The more lights that you have on in your scene, the longer it takes stuff to render. So what am I looking at right now? I'm looking at how shiny the table is. So if I have a lot of lacquer on my wood, this might make sense. And again, you can decide for yourself how shiny you want the wood to be. That's going to be under specular weight. So if you want something really shiny, then turn up the specular weight really high. That's going to be very, very lacquered wood. If you want some wood that is not shiny at all, then of course turn down your specular weight. And don't forget you also have roughness here. So maybe it's an old table, but it still has some lacquer on it. So if you turn the roughness up, which is what I'm going to do here, then your specularity won't be so plastic looking, it won't be so metallic looking. And you can always, again, test this by using render region. Just don't forget, if you have that selected object option on, right? Render selected object only, you got to have something selected. If you have nothing selected, it just renders black, and that can be frustrating. So don't forget about that checkbox if you're using it. So I like this a little bit better. Look at the difference here. The reflection is not quite so intense. It's more of a dull sheen. Specularity has been spread out due to turning up the roughness of the specularity. So, come on, Maya. Maya's misbehaving right now. Ah, man. What I find to be a pain in the butt sometimes is that when you click the escape button, it sometimes crashes the render, or it might crash Maya completely. So be careful when you're clicking that escape button. You might want to click that escape button as quickly as possible. Don't wait until 90% of the way through your render. Clicking the escape button at that point might just simply crash Maya. Okay, now I'm giving you some knowledge that might be a little bit too early. I might be jumping the gun here, but we're going to cover this next class, so it's a little bit of a preview of what we're going to do next class. So next class, we'll be adding a texture. Go to your base color channel. Go to the option box. Go to File. And then at this point, we can plug in the image that we have, and always use photos. And don't argue with me about that, because if you want realism, then you should be using photos. If you want something cartoony, then don't use photos. I don't know. Our goal is realism here. So because the goal is realism, then we should be using photos. And I mean, you know, for other projects or other classes, by all means, hand paint your textures. But you can already tell by the preview how nice this wood looks. See how nice this wood looks? Looks really nice. It looks a little too smooth for me. But let's see what it looks like in the render. By the way, the 6 button will now show you the texture. Finally, the 6 button. Oh, there it is. So we can finally see the texture with the 6 button. And don't forget 7 is lighting. So now 6 and 7. 6 for textured, 7 for lighting. Now that's what it looks like with the lighting and the texture. But don't ever trust the viewport, because the viewport lies. Only worry about what you see in the render. And so this probably will be the last one for the day. Again, watch this checkbox, because you could forget about it and then wonder why things are rendering black. Clearly you don't want that. So I've unchecked it with the idea that this will be the last render, and I'll render this. So who's got questions? Somebody's got to have questions. That's a lot, guys. That's a lot of material. A lot of material.
Are you going to be posting this video somewhere?
Yeah, all the videos are recorded via Twitch, and you guys should feel very, very special, because this is the first time in 13 years that I've ever recorded my demos. So yeah, they're all on Twitch. They're all there for you to watch later. So I feel like it's only fair because of the pandemic, and because you know, a lot of students have been specifically requesting the recordings so they can review the material and fast forward through stuff and rewind and, you know, just get to the good part. Skip to the end where he talks about texturing. I mean, watch the whole thing, because your materials and lighting need to be completely finished before you think about adding textures. So please perfect your modeling, perfect your blocking and composition, perfect your lighting, perfect your material qualities, And at the very, very end there, you can finally add a texture. Literally, it's the last thing you want to do. And so for that reason, what's due Thursday is to put an AI standard surface on everything. And then tweak your AI standard surface. Tweak the specularity. Tweak the base color if you have to. That's fine. But we don't want to worry about the actual photos or the actual texturing until Tuesday when this is all due. So the final render will be due a week from today, and then Thursday's homework will be to add textures. And always in your workflow, always in your pipeline, always when you're working in 3D, it should follow this specific order. Start with a concept and a narrative. Then, from there, make your models and lock down your camera as soon as possible. Or make a render camera that you lock down as soon as you can. Once you have your modeling done and your render camera locked down, then, of course, lighting. That's kind of where we are now as of today. And once you have that done, then work on your surface development. Specifically, think about what's shiny, what's not. And then the very, 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 very last thing you do is add your photos for your texturing. And I don't know, guys, what do you think? Is this coming along? Does it look good to you? I mean, you getting it? Hello? It's about 3:15, so I think I'll turn.
That sounds good.
Okay, I know.
Yeah, it looks good.
Hello.
Okay, sorry about the lag. I know the lag is making things painful. So, yeah, rewatch this video if you need to. But again, for homework, everything needs a AI standard surface on everything. Literally. Just put an AI standard surface on every object, except for your lights, but every piece of geometry needs to have the AI standard surface on it. Then go in and tweak the AI standard surface, and then add your specularity, or remove your specularity, or add your transmission, or remove your transmission. There's going to be an Arnold guide online, so don't be afraid to just like Google AI standard surface guide. I know that's maybe weird, but there's a whole document, docs.arnoldrenderer.com. So there's probably, oh God, I don't know, 10, 20 pages on just this one shader. So please don't be afraid to look at this. But like, for example, it talks about the difference between transmission, which makes things like glass or water or honey or soap bubble, versus metalness, which of course makes things more metal, gold, silver, iron, and so on. So this goes through everything that you need to know. Diffuse color versus roughness versus specularity. Even talks about normals. Each one of these things it talks about like in painful detail. So base color versus specular. Specular we said was shininess, right? So base color, this is going to be, well, the overall color, but also where you would feed in your color texture or your photo. This is going to be your metalness and what that metallic or metal attribute does. I would love to go over every single page of this document with you, but oh my God, I only have so much time. So your assignment again is to put the AI standard surface on every object in your scene and begin to tweak your settings. Specifically, tweak your specularity, tweak your transmission, tweak like how do we make it more or less shiny using specularity? Do we need it to be rough specularity or smooth specularity? In other words, if it's rougher, then we get something like this versus this, which is a lot more metal, a lot more reflective, a lot more like glass. So this is what you get to do for homework, is basically tweak all of your surface qualities. By the way, IOR stands for index of refraction. This is how light bounces off of a surface, and you can see depending on your index of refraction, you get a very different result for shiny objects. So if your glass or metal doesn't look right, it might be because your index of refraction is wrong. We'll talk more about this later, but this is just so much that you need to do for surface development. Just don't worry about your textures until next class. Worry about your materials now, worry about your textures later. I guess that's all. We got about 2 minutes till the end of class. So I'm going to render my glowing crystal ball, and then I guess I'm gonna say goodbye. So I'll stop the stream here and take some questions. But that's it. You know what to do for homework. Oh my God, my crystal ball is pink. I have no idea. I gotta go make it green again. But yeah, that's weird. Anyway, okay. I'm gonna stop the stream. So.